Hey guys, today's the day. Today is the day where Sukuna finally meets the cat girl of his dreams. Welcome everybody to part 7 for What If Subaru Was Sukuna's Vessel. Now, for those of you who have not seen this magnificent series, make sure you're up here at the top upper right hand corner, and you'll find a playlist with the hilarious adventures of Subaru and Sukuna from JuJutsu Kaisen, journeying through the ReZero world together, clapping demons, clapping spirits, clapping everything pretty much, and also getting clapped a few times. But anyway, this part is going to be one of the best parts of the series, I can solidly confirm. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get into it. Enough waiting. Finally, part 7 for What If Subaru Was Sukuna's Vessel. The time had finally come. Subaru, with his body having been healed enough to where he could actually move and his stamina having been recovered due to his intense focus and strange cursed energy powers thanks to Sukuna, Subaru would still be at around 45% of his strength, but would definitely be able to go with Amelia to the royal selection. Amelia, walking into the room seeing Subaru doing push-ups, would have one eye twitching, looking over to Rem and Ram, who would have no answer to his miraculous recovery. Subaru, you're so weird. Subaru would look up saying, What's up? I'm all healed. Are we ready to go to this royal selection in the capital thingy? Amelia would then sigh saying, Yes. After all, I did promise you. But I hope you know that I don't like this, she'd say, humping and making a pouty face. Subaru would then capture this image into his mind, and capturing it forever within his memory, as Sukuna would tell him that he's a creep. Shut up, Sukuna, Subaru would whisper under his breath. Huh? What was that? Amelia would ask. Oh, nothing, my sweet princess, Subaru would say, with Amelia getting grossed out again. Subaru would pull himself up from the ground, as he then says he's about to be ready to go, with Amelia telling him he doesn't need to be in such a rush as she starts walking towards the front gate, trying to get into the carriage. Oh, don't think you can leave me behind, Subaru would say, laughing as he then skips down the hallway, practically glowing. Subaru would enter just inside the carriage, with Rem following close behind sitting next to him. Subaru would then turn as Ram would close the door, slamming it shut, as Subaru would be excited to go to the capital, Amelia sighing, already knowing something was going to happen. As the three would continue going towards the capital, driving along the countryside roads, Amelia would be making it incredibly clear to Subaru that he is only coming with to receive the maximum healing that he can from Felix, one of the highest and most powerful healers in the capital with using water magic. Subaru and Sukuna would be discussing in their mind what the capital would look like, with the two of them being excited, having not been into a big city since their first ever trip to Lagunica together after they'd been teleported all of those seemingly long weeks ago. And finally, after a couple of hours of riding in the carriage, Ren would pull on Subaru's coat saying, Subaru, look! Subaru would turn looking out the window as his arm would brush Rem, causing her to blush. Amelia would notice this and would cause her to feel annoyed for some reason. As Subaru is leaning towards the window, his face would be pressed against the side, as he then looks outside, seeing the morning sun now burning into his eyes before his eyes would adjust, seeing the glowing, bustling city around him. Whoa, we're really in the capital, Subaru would say, excited. Look, Sukuna, look! Sukuna would sigh, saying, kid, I've been here much longer than you have, been in the city many times. Shut up, Sukuna, you and I got to this world at the same time. Sukuna would smile, saying, Yeah, I know. Subaru would be annoyed with Sukuna, but he wouldn't let it ruin his day. He then sits back down, excited to walk around the capital on a date with Amelia. Rem would be thinking the exact same thing, except her date with Subaru. Eventually, Amelia would call for the carriage to stop, as they would finally reach their destination. This being the front place where the guards would be located, as well as where Felix would be at. Amelia, Subaru, and Rem would then step out of the carriage, now onto the cobblestone streets, looking around at the bustling fantasy town. At least to Subaru, it felt like a fantasy. For Amelia and Rem, although they hadn't come to the city that often, they weren't exactly starstruck as much as Subaru was. With Amelia walking towards the front gate, we would see a familiar-looking guard that many of you may know. He would have lilac purple hair and his eyes ablaze in purple as well, with gold flecks in them. He'd be wearing the white coat and uniform of a guard of Lagunica, and standing aside, he would have been waiting for Amelia and her party's arrival. Immediately as they would begin to head towards the door, the knight would then pull his sword to the side, as he then bends down on a knee, taking Amelia's hand and kissing it with his lips, greeting her in his formal tone. Amelia would have almost no reaction to this, pretty used to the courtesy that her as well as the other royal selectionees would have from the knights, but Subaru would be livid. Subaru would have a vein twitching in his forehead as he's looking down, his fingers impulsively now contracting. Sukuna would be whistling inside of him saying, "Ooh, you're pissed. It's getting hot and toasty in here." "Shut up," Subaru would say. Rem would turn, saying, with Subaru saying, "Nah, nothing," wiping a handkerchief over his sweaty forehead. Julius would have noticed him by now, and Amelia would introduce him as Julius, one of the guards of Lagunica, which Subaru would have picked up by himself from that point. Amelia would tell Subaru that it'll probably be some time before Felix is available, and that he should just wait here with Rem, while her and Julius would go inside so that they could be ready for the royal selection. Subaru would look up wanting to say something. Amelia would turn, giving him a stern look as he would then pull his hand back, stopping, as Julius would pull the door closed behind him, smirking just as the door was about to close. Subaru, seeing this, would be enraged as he said, "Why oughta?" Rem would then calm him down, pulling on his shirt, saying, "Let's just wait," as Lady Amelia says, as she would go and buy some appas for him to eat while they were just sitting there. Subaru would decide to go look around, and Rem would tell him to be back as soon as possible, saying that he can't get lost, with Rem wanting to accompany him, but he just wandering around. Rem still had some grocery shopping to do after all. As Subaru would be walking around, he would notice a girl about to get mugged in an alleyway. Immediately he would run over, dropping the bag of appas, as he would see a fair-skinned girl with high, fiery hair, pulled into a tight bun, with a red dress on and a cloak over her. "Just try it," she would say, trying to egg on the thugs. Subaru would rush in, dropping his bag of appas, as he then has two fists, using a double lariat, basically running in and slamming the two thugs behind the head and into the ground, not even having to use any cursed energy, just his pure physical strength. Subaru would then pull himself up, brushing his knee off, asking her if she was alright, with her making a sound, saying, "She could have handled it all by herself. I don't think I ever recalled asking you to step in, now did I, commoner?" Subaru would reflexively pull himself back, prepared for a hit, as in his mind Sukuna would then say, "Look out, it's a tsundere." "Oh my god, shut the hell up, Sukuna," Subaru would say. "What did you just say?" she would say. "Did you just speak like that to me?" This being Priscilla's way of speaking. This would be when Al would walk in from behind, a tall, buff man wearing a metal helmet and armor over his skull. "Ah, there you are, miss. I've been looking all over for you. You shouldn't run off like that, you know." "Don't tell me what to do." What are those things?" she'd say, pointing to the bag. Subaru would turn, saying, "The appas?" "That's not an appa. Appas have white flesh. Didn't you know that?" she'd say. Even the commoners I thought were smarter than that." "White flesh," Subaru thinking. Do you mean to say that you've never had an appa with its skin before?" Subaru saying, questioning this, with him thinking, major rich girl syndrome. Sukuna nodding in his head, agreeing with him for the first time in what felt like a couple of days. Subaru would pick up an apple, handing it to her in a patronizing way with a soft smile, saying, "Someone had to teach you eventually," wiping a tear from his eye. "Don't talk to me like that. It pisses me off," she'd say. "But I did want one. I'm glad at least you can read my mind, it seems," she'd say, making another sigh as she then grabs it, as she then tries to take a bite, realizing that she actually likes it with the crispier skin on at the outside. When we return home, I demand that I have all my appas with skin on them from now on," she would say. "Yes, my lady," Al would say. Subaru would be a bit surprised, as he would then walk off, taking his appas, as he then goes off to find Rem. Rem would have returned from her grocery shopping with Subaru alongside, walking out of the alley, with Priscilla and Al following behind him. Amelia would have just walked out of the guard station, seeing Priscilla and Subaru together. What could they be? Julius would be behind her, as Subaru would see Amelia waving. Amelia would walk forward, sort of angry, but she didn't really know why, wondering what happened. Subaru would turn saying, "Oh, this lady was getting mugged by these dudes in an alley." He'd point to the now 2 unconscious men in the alleyway. "And I saved her," he'd say. Priscilla would then start laughing, saying, "Well, well, well, if it isn't our diversity charity case of the royal selection." "Amelia," Priscilla would say in a patronizing tone. Julius would tell her to stop it, and Subaru would turn around too, not realizing what was going on here. As Amelia would then tell Subaru she's another one of the candidates for the royal selection. Subaru would jump back saying he didn't even realize that, with all rubbing his head saying he probably should have mentioned that. "So you're with her, huh?" Priscilla would say. "Well, I'll take him off your hands," she'd say. Amelia would hold her hand out saying he's not for sale, with her eyes narrowing. Both Subaru and Sukuna would feel a light feeling in their hearts and their stomachs, as these 2 beautiful ladies would be fighting over them, it seems. Subaru would have a tear in his eye wiping away, as Amelia would realize what he's thinking, telling him it's not like that, as she then slaps him on the head a few times. Julius would be trying to hold back a laugh, as Subaru would turn, still feeling annoyed at him. This would be when he would notice someone standing behind Julius. This being, suddenly, Subaru would take a hand to one knee, as his tone of voice would change, black markings forming over his skin, as he looks into her eyes. "My lady, I've been awaiting you for so long," he would say, his voice sounding as sexy as possible. Subaru, or I guess I should say Sukuna, taking Felix's hand and kissing it the same way Julius had to Amelia. Amelia now realizing that she was even more annoyed. But why? Felix was Before she could say this, Sukuna would then stand up, putting his arm around Felix, saying, "What would a name of such a fine creature such as yourself be?" he would say, Sukuna staring into Felix's eyes. Felix would look up, about to press his lips together, as Sukuna awaited the kiss, leaning down. Finally, what he had been searching for since coming to this damned world had appeared. The cat girl he had been seeking to free his heart from this cursed body. Subaru inside of Sukuna be screaming, "Sukuna, no! It's a trap!" It was too late. Sukuna's knee pressed against it, as Felix would say, "But I'm a boy." Something within Sukuna would shatter that day. His hopes, his dreams, and his soul. Sukuna would fall to the ground, switching back with Subaru, curling into a corner, as Amelia would be watching as the marks would disappear, realizing that that was Sukuna, the one who had saved her originally when Subaru and Sukuna had switched personalities against Elsa Gran here at the Bowel Hunter many weeks ago. "It was a trap," Subaru would say. Huh? Julius, Felix, Amelia, and Priscilla and all would all be confused, having no idea what just happened. "Sukuna, it was a trap," Subaru would say, pounding his fist into the ground, causing cracks. "I'm so sorry, my friend." Shut up, Sukuna would say, telling Subaru to screw off, locking himself in his room. "I need time to recuperate after this. I was so prepared. You have no idea." Subaru, who had let Sukuna take over his body for this one moment, the one thing Sukuna had been searching for all these years, would feel sad. He would feel empathetic for one he could call friend in the search for culture. "So I guess this takes to mean that you'll switch to the elf side?" "No," Sukuna would say flatly. "One day. One day I will find my cat girl. But if that day doesn't ever come, then Su-chan, I'm sorry, but I'll be taking your body, and I will have to be doing unspeakable things," he would say, a tear falling down his metaphysical face. Amelia would suddenly slap Subaru, telling him to stop it, having been relieved that Subaru was now back, but she had no idea why she was relieved. Julius and everyone else would be stunned, as this would just be causing everyone to break up, with Priscilla saying she has to get going to the selection, her and all now running off, while Amelia, Julius, and Felix would also try to leave. Felix would turn one last time around saying, "I'm sorry, but I can't be what you want." He would turn, walking away, his tail flicking in the wind, as Sukuna would smile in his heart saying, "It's alright." A single tear shedding through his face. Subaru, having this emotional development, would stand, as he tells Rem that they're going to the royal selection. If Sukuna can fight for his love, then I can too, he'd say. "I'm gonna punch that Julius guy right in the face and show him who Amelia's knight is." Rem would tell Subaru that that doesn't sound like a rather good idea, considering that you made that promise to Lady Amelia and all. But Subaru, much like the original, would ignore this warning, as Subaru would then go running off before Rem could stop him, which she would have tried to. Subaru would find Priscilla and Al's carriage into the actual castle, and he would hitch a ride with them, with the two finding him interesting and deciding to allow him to accompany along with them. After entering inside, Subaru would be standing next to Felix inside of the building, with Felix patting him on the back saying, "No hard feelings," with Subaru nodding. Subaru would be looking forward as now the contestants would enter into the main hall, where the castle ministers would be hosting this royal selection exam. Anyway, Amelia, Priscilla, then Anastasia and Crush would walk in, with Felix being Crush's knight, Amelia not having anyone, so Roswell would be standing behind her. Like in the original, Roswell decided to fly there instead this time though. Alongside them would be Anastasia, which would have her cat guards, and as Subaru sees Anastasia's guards, the other wolf and beast people, Sukuna would have a light of hope opened within him. And then Crush would have Felix, as I was saying. And just like in the original, this Subaru still has pride, if not even more than what he had during the original anime timeline. To the point when Amelia was getting insulted by the ministers, he would stand up, not willing to take this shit any longer. "Hey," he'd say, "don't talk about her like that." This would be when everyone in the room would turn, looking to Subaru, with Amelia turning, seeing Subaru there, and having broken his promise. Subaru would have his eyes filled with rage, saying, "What do you know about her? Just because she looks like some witch, that's enough to call her a villain? Is that really all you look for in character? Do you not even know anything about her?" Subaru would call out, everyone in the room being silent. Subaru would then shout out that if anyone has a problem with that, they can fight me, pointing to himself. Amelia would then tell Subaru to stop and sit down. She would turn, looking disappointed and more overall angry that he'd broken the promise that he wouldn't come. Subaru would then turn as he then walks out of the royal selection, walking out the door as Amelia told him to leave. Everyone turning and wondering who that guy was, with Priscilla interested in him even more now. As Subaru walks out, Julius would follow behind, deciding to challenge him. As he would hear him walking behind him, Julius saying that he'll challenge him to a duel, saying that if you're going to proclaim to be anyone's knight, without even being a true knight of Lagunica, it's my duty to put you down to your place. Subaru would turn, having a wicked smile as his eyes would gleam red, saying, "Couldn't take me any time, pretty boy." This sudden change in tone would unnerve Julius, but it wouldn't scare him off. He's just some kid. "Alright, let's do it." Many of the knights would file out, deciding to watch this fight interested. Most of them just looking forward to seeing Julius beat up this newbie, for the fun of it. As they would enter into the arena, Subaru would take off his jacket. "I'll warn you one last time before we start that I'm not going to go easy on you. I'm kind of pissed off at those old guys right now," he'd say. Julius would throw him a wooden sword, him taking up one as well, saying, "Yeah, don't expect anything from me either," he'd say, snickering to himself, thinking this kid has no idea what he's about to face. As the fight between Subaru and Julius would begin, Julius would be shocked. Suddenly, in almost a blink of an instant, Subaru would be directly in front of Julius. Him having pushed cursed energy into his feet, he pushed forward at blinding speeds, his physical strength much higher than Julius had predicted using his spirit magic. What? Subaru would come in flying with a kick, Julius barely able to block of his sword as the wood would be shaking. Julius would then get pushed back, his boots actually holding him up against the sand from friction. After the sword would break, an airwave would then come off as Subaru lands back to the ground, his neck cracking as he then cracks his arms and hands, saying he's ready to do this, gripping the sword. As he holds the sword, he then swipes his hand across it, pushing cursed energy through the wood, cursing the sword and making it turn black. Suddenly, Subaru would then swipe down with the blade, causing a burst of cursed energy to move forward as a wind blade, slashing at Julius. Julius would be forced to use spirit magic to defend himself. This rookie's actually pretty good. Everyone would be shocked as Subaru's actually holding his ground against one of the best knights, second only to Reinhardt. As news of the fight is catching wind in the selection, Amelia runs out with Felix behind. They have to save Subaru. Julius might kill him, she'd be thinking. As they're running towards the stadium, we would hear bashing, slam. We can hear flesh hitting the ground as sands get pushed around. Slash, the cutting of cloth and blood spurting, and silence. the nights would be completely silent as Amelia and Felix would enter the room, seeing half of Subaru's body covered in black tattoos, his clothes having been ripped to shreds from the spirit magic, and the cuts and wounds from Julius already healing. Subaru would be walking forward, his one eye red, as his sword would be completely pitch black. We would see Julius on the ground, his face swollen, trying to conserve more spirit magic, having to go into a 100% against a 50% weakened two-finger Subaru. Subaru would just be bullying this Julius having no chance, considering that cursed energy is especially effective against spirits. Julius, not having a greater spirit like Puck or Beatrice, would have no idea what's even hitting him. This would be when Amelia would tell Subaru to stop, as she runs into the field, just as he's about to finish off Julius with one final blow. As he's about to bring down the sword, he'd hear Amelia's voice, as suddenly the black tattoos would vanish and his eye turns back to its normal golden color. Amelia? He'd look up, his vision hadn't been clear as he drops the sword, turning back to a normal wood. Julius would be coughing up blood, as the knights would be shocked. No one had ever beaten Julius in such a fashion before. There's no way, it wasn't possible. Who is this guy? Julius would have been completely humiliated. He thought he'd be teaching this kid a lesson, but he had no idea the amount of raw power that he was going against. Sukuna with 2 fingers in the JuJutsu Kaisen timeline was enough for Itadori to take on some of the highest level curse grade spirits, that being the 3 nature curses that were attacking the JJK high school. So think about it this way, when Sukuna and Subaru have been together for even longer than that, and Sukuna and Subaru are somewhat friendly, and this Subaru has completely inherited the first finger's techniques and can barely pull off a domain expansion, so he's far more powerful than the 2-finger devoured Itadori that we saw in the Jujutsu Kaisen anime. Anyway, Subaru would then be pulled out of the fight as Julius would be rushed into the hospital to be healed. Amelia would be shocked. She never would have thought Subaru would do anything like this, and it hurt her heart to see it. Why? Why did he do it? Amelia would say. He was challenging your honor, Subaru would say. Amelia would then look up, telling him that if she really wanted to do that, wouldn't she have told him to? Subaru would be shocked, Amelia actually telling him to stop it. And Amelia would then turn, walking away. Subaru barely able to hear the tears falling down her face. She didn't know why, but this right here, it hurt more than what would have happened if she'd saw Subaru being the one on the ground. Seeing him rub her name through the dirt. As someone who would use her position to use her power like that to just abuse someone. Amelia couldn't handle it. She would leave the royal capital, Rem staying behind as Subaru would fall to the ground, realizing what he had done. He had broke his promise to Amelia. Sukuna would be laughing inside, telling Subaru he deserved that one, as Subaru would feel for the first time in this world, defeat. If you guys want to see the next part for What If Subaru was Sukuna's vessel, make sure to slap that like button, comment down below what you thought. This is probably my favorite part of the series so far. I really enjoyed it, and I would have gone more depth into Subaru beating Julius, but this isn't like anti-chakra Naruto. This isn't supposed to be an incredibly dark what if, even though it is a ReZero what if. So I decided to leave some of the gorier details out, like I did similarly with the Neji and Naruto fight in my What If Naruto had anti-chakra. But anyway, if you made it this far, you might as well subscribe so you can see all the future videos and stuff, and notification bell, you know, all the good stuff. But anyway, I can't wait to see the next part and the relationship development and character development we've got going on in the next part, which will be Part 8 for What If Subaru was Sukuna's vessel. I'll see you guys then. Goodbye.